I'd like to introduce Julie Cayley. I hope I pronounced that right. Julie has her BSc, Bachelor of Science, that is, and also a professional agrologist. Is the Executive Director of the Severn Sound Environmental Association in Port McNicoll, Ontario, back to her roots in the Great Lakes water quality. The Severn Sound Environmental Association is a unique watershed based on Joint Municipal Services Board, a partnership of 8 North Simcoe municipalities, which is a great idea. Julie has a significant background in creating successful connections within government, industry, and the agriculture sector, conservation and environmental communities, and has worked for government with OMAFRA and NGOs in Ducks Unlimited Canada. She's been around, as well as running her own consulting business. She specializes in environment conservation with agriculture and rural municipal partnerships, and is a government and industry relations expert. She's a professional agrologist, has a BSc in environmental and resource science from Trent University, and is a graduate of Class 8 of the Ontario's Advanced Agricultural Leadership Program, ALIP. Julie was recently appointed by Minister Yurek as the Muskoka Watershed Advisory on the Muskoka Watershed Advisory Group. Julie was the first woman to chair the Northeast Agriculture and Biological Engineering Community and has passion for developing opportunities for leadership in her communities. She enjoys her time with her family and horses on her farm in Oro Medonte. So another farmer here. Okay, we're going to get grassroots right here. So welcome, Julie. Yeah, I watched this now.
Thank you. So first I'm going to give David number 1 back his note. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Also, thank you. I noted, was there 1 or 2 municipal councillors in the room? 2? 3? Awesome. That's really great to have you here. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. I'm new to the whole mic and the camera thing's freaking me out a bit, but so hopefully I'm going to trigger some ideas following along David's talk around some different thoughts around structure. I don't mean to be rude. I've been on my phone a bit. Back at the office on Georgian Bay, we're dealing with some late season algae blooms today, blue-green algae blooms, so some human health concerns. And my team is in a bit of a freak out because we also aren't used to dealing with the media and we don't love it. But I guess we'll learn. Alrighty. Ooh, this buzzes when you touch it. Oh, that's weird. So I'm going to just quickly go through really where Severn Sound is, what we are, what our history is. We respect our history a great deal. I particularly, because it was one of my first jobs when I graduated, and it's become a really unique style of organization. And again, building on some of the things David talked about, a very unique structure. So I'll talk a bit about our structure and then some of the things we've started doing with our municipalities on the road to climate readiness, as I like to call it. We have a strong history of partnerships, so just a few of the groups we've worked with or partnered with over the years. But where did we really come from? Severn Sound's the southeast portion of Georgian Bay. You can see a small map off to the left and down to the bottom. About 1,000 kilometer squared watershed. We're sort of southwest of you on Georgian Bay, sort of I'll show you a better map in a minute, but we're one of the 3 Great Lakes areas, delisted areas of concern, which is also a really unique opportunity for us. Again, if you look, it's a bit tough to see on the map, but all the way on the left side, we have Tiny Township through Penetang, Midland, all the way over to part of Georgian Bay Township, Severn, so just up to the edge of Orillia, and then down to the Horseshoe Valley Road, basically, to our south. We do not have a conservation authority on our watershed. We are bordered by 2 conservation authorities who we partner with. So I'll speak a bit to what that means as I move forward. Respecting our history, so if any of you know the area, Wymarsh Wildlife Center, we were housed there in the early days when we were known as one of the Great Lakes areas of concern. So in 1987, under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement between Canada and the US, there was 43 areas of concern on both sides of the border listed. We were one of the 17 listed in Canada. 5 of the Canadian ones are cross-border, so more of a challenge. And really we were listed because, and all areas of concern, or AOCs as they're known as, get listed because there's use impairment. So you either can't swim in it, you can't drink the water, you can't fish. So it's what the community can or can't do with that water that they'd like to be able to do. Ours was particularly phosphorus, algae blooms at the time, and some issues with habitat as well. Now you can see the graph. Those are phosphorus levels from the 70s into present day, so significant reduction in those levels, and that's partially what led to our delisting. We have to also thank the zebra mussels and the quagga mussels, although an invasive species helped in the delisting and clearing of the water column as well. The other unique thing I just want to point out, if just looking at that graph, we have one of the longest standing data sets on the Great Lakes, so our data is continuous back to the 70s, so we're very fortunate and hopeful that that's going to be able to continue. So again, the way a remedial action plan process works is ground up. So the province and the federal government do the designating based on the research that says here's the water quality problem. If the community says we don't care if we can fish it, eat the fish out of it, drink the water, swim in it, we don't care anything to do with it, there is no organization to clean it up. You go away and they deal with the other areas of concern. So the community was involved in that. So how do you want to deal with this? What are the issues? The other great thing about that is there's no finger pointing. Everybody's part of the problem. Everybody's part of the solution. So nobody gets to blame each other. It's the sewage plants, it's the ag, it's private lawns, it's everybody has to be part of that process. So your goal is to restore those beneficial uses, and so the other piece I want to mention is there's a public advisory committee in all of these processes that really drives that process. So we worked out of the Weimarsh Wildlife Center at the time. It was very heavily funded through both the federal and provincial governments, and we formed in the mid-2000s, or sorry, 97, so close to the 2000s, the Severn Sound Environmental Association. Knowing that we were on track to delist at some point, we knew there was going to need to be some mechanism in place to keep it delisted once it's delisted, so you can't just walk away. I, in my brilliance at the time, decided that meant I wouldn't have a job. So I had worked here since 91 at that point and decided I should probably leave because there was not going to be any employment. I could have stayed, apparently, but I have come back. So in 2003, we delisted. So at the time, the only other area to delist was Collingwood Harbour. So this was huge. This was big news, great community news. The International Joint Commission requires that you monitor and maintain that commitment to stewardship and monitoring activities. And you have a big party and everybody goes away, the money goes away, but now what do you do? So you've invested millions and millions of dollars to clean up this area, and now what? We didn't have a watershed-based organization other than Severn Sound Environmental Association at the time. So I'm going to talk now about what that process became. So one of the things that's required is a sustainability plan in your delisting process. So as that was happening, our 8 municipalities that I had shown you on that earlier map, our watershed municipalities, decided that they were all in. They were going to show some leadership in this process. And they did not want to be a conservation authority. They did not want to fall under that legislation in the province. And they decided to create their own organization. So looking at structure at the time, what they had available to them as municipalities was a joint municipal services board. So I'm going to speak a little bit about what those look like. So we are certainly not anti-conservation authority. We love the fact that we have 2 neighboring conservation authorities that do awesome work and will loan us what they do. So I'm going to speak a bit about that collaboration as well and the value in making sure you're working with your neighboring organizations. So this Joint Municipal Services Board was created. It's a pretty significant document, pretty significant work in terms of just the administration of how to create it and our mission statement at the time. So what is a Joint Municipal Services Board? So municipal services boards are the simpler versions are things like your library services board. What's different about this is, the slide, I know, boring text, but it's pulled out of the Municipal Act, and it's really the opportunity for 2 or more municipalities to come together with the requirement of a shared service. So you could do that with a library board, for instance, if you had one library and you were sharing it across more than one municipality. But in Severn Sound, our municipalities chose to take this approach, all 8 of them, and create a watershed-based organization. So 8 municipalities, and this is out of our corporation bylaws. In 2009, they came together. The mayors and the CAOs are the ones who drove the process at the time, and created what our board was going to look like, what our opportunities were, what we would be doing for them. So the purpose is in supporting the municipalities in the management of their environmental activities, to continue to coordinate the long-term sustainability plan, as well as at the time, those of you who are familiar with the Clean Water Act source protection authorities, so source protection being municipal drinking water protection, that's a legal requirement. Severn Sound as an association became one of 2 non-conservation authority source protection authorities, so we have the legal authority to implement that. That's the only legal authority our organization has under the Clean Water Act. So as the executive director, I have 8 bosses. I report to 8 municipalities. Technically, my board chair is the ultimate boss, but those 8 municipalities direct us in what we do, and we help coordinate with them in terms of what their priorities are. And their priorities obviously are often very similar. My board members are all elected officials as well, so they pass bylaws to elect or nominate who's going to sit on our board on an annual basis as well. This, and I understand the slides will be available to folks anyway, so I just wanted to be able to include, so if this became an interest, here's the example, and we would provide anything anybody who's ever interested in what the bylaw looks like when they created us, and some of the wording around the organization. So in terms of our structure, this was an exciting day. We got our first ever team shirts donated by Cabela's and Barrie, and the team quite enjoyed the picture where they all look like they're going to the bathroom in the field. And the structure of our office, so again, I'm going to speak a bit. It's a really unique structure because one of your municipalities has to be your treasurer municipality. So if I need to use a business number for anything, I'm using the business number of that municipality. We aren't a separate not-for-profit. We aren't a charity, and I'll speak a bit to some of the advantages and disadvantages. We pay that municipality, so the 8 municipalities contribute to our core budget. Out of that, we pay the one who's being our treasurer municipality to do that work. We've recently relocated our office. We were in a building in Midland and have relocated to Port McNicoll. And so one of the things that each municipality gets then, so rather than having to, for instance, so we have 8 specialized staff in the office, from geographic information systems mapping specialist to a wetland and habitat biologist to a water scientist who's a pure limnologist. And David, number 2, has had some work with some of our technical staff, and they're really highly skilled individuals. And our newest addition is an invasive species coordinator. So if you think about 8 municipalities sitting side by side, fairly small rural, even small urban, limited budgets, they probably all have a problem with invasive species. They're all handling it differently. How are they going to staff up? Are they each going to spend, by the time you get your benefits, et cetera, and are they going to spend $80,000 each on a person to deal with invasives? Are they going to make their parks guy do that? Are they going to make their bylaw guy or girl do that? Instead, we went to them and said, we know you're all having these problems. You're all coming to us anyway. We hired one person who's now doing that coordination for all 8 of them, pulls each of them together, makes sure that they're getting what they need. What I will say is we also do these things as special projects. So for example, we go to them and say, we think this is a good idea. Our board agrees, our board passes a motion that they want us to put that in the budget. If it's a special project, a municipality can opt out. Unfortunately, ours, Oromadani, opted out for the first 2 years of invasive species. Because the program has been such a success, our board has asked us to roll it up into the core, so it will no longer be optional. It's going to become part of the core budget, and it will just be a service provided to all municipalities. Our budget. So I'm not going to go through the detail. The budget's a bit odd, but each municipality pays a similar base And then based on their assessed value and properties, there's a formula, not similar to a Conservation Authority levy formula, but not the same. And then they get, the rest of the budget is then apportioned out on that. And so they all pay a base, then they pay based on the size of probably the area we'd be working in within those municipalities. So in terms of the rest of our budget, so I'm going to show you a graph in a second, but our staff spend a ton of time working on fundraising, research, grant proposals on behalf of the partners. So again, as David alluded to, there's a huge advantage that rather than having tiny township go look for, let's say, an agriculture program that might help do cover crops or soil erosion management, why not have all 8 of them doing that so that all the farmers within those 8 municipalities can access the same thing? So we will lead those for them. So they come to us or they come to our board, we do that as well. We can accept donations, although we are not a charity. Any municipality can issue a tax receipt. One of the challenges we've had is people get excited, they donate money, they go into the township office, and then they get a receipt from the township, and they say, well, but I gave my money to Severn Sound, not the township. And the fact is that's where your receipt's going to come from. We're very fortunate the township we've moved to has done a great job of creating this beautiful little letter that goes out with it to say, thank you for donating to SSEA. This is why your tax receipt's coming from the township. We don't have government transfer payments. We have, through the local conservation authority for source protection planning, we've been informed this is it. There will no longer be any help to support source protection planning. So that in terms of anything close to a transfer payment. So the rest of our money is all fundraise, donations, research, grant proposals. Again, the challenge for us, one of the challenges is a Trillium Fund would be an awesome opportunity for us, some of the green grant programs. Because we are technically considered a municipality, we can't access that money. On the other, and neither can a conservation authority. On the flip side of that, we can easily partner with any of the folks on that first slide I showed you and have them help with leading some grants. So maybe like a Kuchiching Conservancy or a local land trust who has similar interests. David's organization, if we find folks who have similar interests who want to lead the grant, we can certainly do that. And the concept of exploring developing a foundation or some other arm is something our board's always doing as well. So a look at what the money technically looks like within us. And that was 2018 numbers. But our municipalities, when all together, so whether it's the core funding, which you can see over to the right-hand side, or it's some of their projects money, all told, they're in for about 73%. So 8 municipalities are sharing about 73% of the core of the functioning budget. Our overall budget this year is up closer to 1.2 million. So that's all fundraised dollars on top of that, dollars that we can find elsewhere. This doesn't include things we don't pay for so that we can get in kind. We're very fortunate because of our remedial action plan days and our relationship with the provincial and federal governments. Our lab load is still considered a Ministry of Environment lab load, so we're able to use the Dorset lab and not pay for those costs. If we had to pay for that, our budget would go through the roof. And if we had to go privately, we would never get the quality of lab work that we get. So we're pushing hard to make sure the province leaves that lab alone, and if anything, helps increase its ability to handle everybody's capacity in Ontario. We went into a strategic planning exercise a couple years ago that cost us next to nothing, was a ton of fun, and was a great opportunity for our board and our staff to think outside the box and be sort of the hairy audacious thinkers that they wanted to be. And our new vision is that Severn Sound will be the most resilient and thriving Great Lakes watershed. I think with our 8 municipalities leading us, we can certainly get there. It isn't always easy to keep them on board with what we think the priorities are, because they obviously have tons of other priorities that are coming to them on a daily basis from the folks in the community. So some of the things we do. So again, I'm not going to go through this. You'll have it if you want to go through it. I thought it would be more fun to sort of hit some of the high levels with pictures. So environmental monitoring, expert data collection and analysis. Like I mentioned, we're one of the few areas in the country that has a data set that goes back continuously to the 1970s. So we can really spend a lot of opportunity looking at trends, helping municipalities with what is changing, what isn't changing. Again, we often take our board members, anybody out within the community that wants to go. And I can't emphasize enough how unique it is to have that length of a data set in the Great Lakes. Citizen science, we've gotten more and more involved in citizen science, engaging our public and our residents and the ratepayers, because the ratepayers are also the ones that are going to those, the ratepayer or the council meetings to say what they do or don't want to see their money spent on. This, to me, it was a huge learning curve for us. We're used to working with organizations that use teenagers, high school volunteers, whoever we can get. We'd never considered senior citizens, and we ended up with this really awesome group of absolutely, I'm going to say it, out of control, over 80-year-olds who three of them were science teachers in their previous life, so knew way more than any of us ever would. Two of them should never have been allowed to drive golf carts. And one of them outworked probably, the three summer staff at least that we had were almost in tears by the end of the day trying to keep up. But these people have been so incredible in helping us see different things we could be doing and different groups of people. We had never thought about accessing senior citizens. And the team, it's a totally different group of folks. You're not mentoring them, they're mentoring you. And it's been a huge advantage to our team to be able to do that. Shoreline cleanups, we do some of the big shoreline cleanup work as well. Invertebrate and algae monitoring, like I mentioned, algae, again, is becoming a bigger issue. We're not really sure why, but we're seeing more blooms, and it's late in the season to be seeing blooms, especially when they're usually related to warm water, heat, and light. So climate change, maybe. The invertebrate and algae monitoring, I will say that's usually more of the popular thing that our high school gang loves to work with. Fish habitat delineation and mapping, something unique. David's group has some really neat new equipment that they're working with on the chemistry side. We had some really cool equipment. We were doing underwater mapping, having a good look at habitat, not just from the surface. This kind of information we, again, do on behalf of our 8 municipalities, our shoreline municipalities. They can use that then. They get mapping with sort of red, yellow, green zones that they can use in their planning as a part of their planning tools to see, where they should be approving, maybe thinking twice about work that's being suggested to a municipality. We do stewardship work. We used to do a lot more stewardship work when we had more external funding, but we still, one of the main thrusts of our work is tree planting and providing trees to our municipalities and their residents at a lower rate because we can bulk order, and then our municipalities help us do the distribution. Again, another all of these things to me are either monitoring or implementing some pieces around how we're adapting to changes in climate. And over time, I just think when I first started working with agriculture in the 90s, we didn't ever think of it as adapting to climate change. We thought of it as adapting to what's happening this week or this year or where my erosion problems are. So tree planting projects are certainly something we still do a lot of. We also do plan input and review. So similar to a conservation authority, the big difference is we don't do it directly with the development community. We do it with the municipality. We don't ever deal directly with the development community. I mentioned drinking water, source water protection. So again, that means instead of each municipality having to hire a specialized risk management officer, I have one risk management officer. The 8 of them share the cost and use that person, and not one of our 8 municipalities would need her full time. So she's a pretty busy person, but it's a much more efficient model. That also means we have one person dealing with the province and some of the policy changes who can then communicate back. So the municipalities aren't spending their time each trying to go to these meetings. The other thing we provide is support, and I think, David, it came up in your presentation, was the concept of trying to influence at a higher level. Our municipalities will ask us to go to or help them set up meetings or provide the technical support if they're going to meetings at AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, or ROMA, the Rural Municipal Association, and we'll provide that support for them as well. So again, just quickly back to our strategic plan, under the sound science piece at the top, and you gotta love someone who's helping you as a volunteer do strategic planning and makes your strategic plan spell out your organizational name as SEA. It was pretty exciting for us. I'm embarrassed to say some of us didn't notice in the first 2 editions. But under sound science, what became really clear was the need to build resilience for our communities as something that we haven't named and targeted hadn't at that point. So climate change, adaptation, and planning. So for us, that fit under the sound science piece. So in a small municipality, similar to stuff David was talking about, just because you're a small urban municipality doesn't mean you're not dealing with the same issues Toronto might deal with, whether it's a culvert washout, or this is the town of Penetanguishene. So if any of you have ever been to the town of Penetanguishene, you don't want to be learning how to drive a standard vehicle on the main hill in the main street of the town. It's a cliff. And it's a cliff that goes right out into the bay. And they were doing some work, I think it was last year, and it was a flash flood storm that obviously it took heavy equipment down with it, down the front street. Out of that, the municipality was being hammered by the media saying, would you be prepared for a 1 in a 100-year storm? They have an amazing engineer at this town who said, well, A, that was almost a 1 in a 100-year storm, and no, we're not prepared, and they're hitting us like every other year. And they don't have time in a lot of cases to deal with or to find the resources. They're pretty full out, some of these staff, trying to deal with the issue of today, which is getting that street up and running again so those businesses can have people coming to the front door. So again, that's an opportunity for a collaborative to help with. But again, we're experiencing everything that every other community is, whether it's more extreme storms, the floods, high water levels in the Great Lakes. We've talked last night, yes, we used to complain how low they were, now we're complaining about how high they are. But that's another piece that, again, it isn't happening in one community, it's happening across communities. Groundwater levels are up, so we're seeing much more saturated soil to start with. If you think about Great Lakes water levels going up and you have a flood event and water's supposed to be going out your storm sewer, but the water level in the lake is up, so the water's up in the sewer. You've got much less capacity for it to even go out in the lake now. So more and more problems happening. Obviously another picture, the intense rainfalls, runoff, the water levels piece. One of the things that we do also and coordinate for our shoreline municipalities is we have a water level gauge in the town of Midland. So the town of Midland is one of, if not the last remaining functioning grain harbor on the Great Lakes. So grain ships are coming in and out. They need to know what the water levels are before they come in. Well, now we're also one of the main stops in Midland for these new Great Lakes cruises. So we went from the first year having, I think, 4 to 5 cruise ships. This year the target was 15. And being able to say to our municipalities, this is a great economic change. What are you gonna do when the cruise ship comes in and A, there's not enough water for them to get in there, or it's green and nobody wants to look at it when they get out? Like, why are people gonna wanna keep coming here if you haven't looked after the quality? On the rural front, we've talked a bit about, just touched on agriculture, but soil erosion. Just because you're in the rural sector doesn't mean you're dealing with anything less relevant and anything less intense, whether it's changes in storm events or changes in management practices. Really, I think Don said it, right? Soil is really important to a farmer where it is, not in the river. If you're one of us environmental folks and you're standing looking at the river, you don't want the soil in the river. So we're kind of on the same side in this game. And how do we help them keep the soil where they need it and out of where we don't want it? So we're doing a bit of work on that front as well. Again, it takes money, and that's one of our roles for our municipalities, is to help find and create the plans and the applications to try to find a way to get that. Again, looking for funding. We also do climate monitoring. So the other thing we've been able to do is when we're doing our water quality monitoring pieces, we also monitor flows in our rivers. Well, to do that, we need climate stations. So rain, wind, temperature, that sort of thing. So we've been able to set some of those stations up. In the spirit of learning, I've already had a takeaway from Don's opening this morning, which is we need to be looking more at helping analyze heat units out of those to maybe provide more service to our agriculture community with the stations we've had in place, again, for years. So I just want to touch then on what are we doing? So what are the initiatives and activities that we're sort of heading down the road in? The more I think, and the more I think about the work that a lot of us do, a lot of folks in this room probably have done throughout your careers, a lot of what you're doing is already really the thoughts around adaptation to climate change. We just maybe didn't know that's what we were doing at the time. You're trying to help a river deal with the fact that it's got erosion problems, or a landscape that has erosion problems. So one of the things that's become clear for us, particularly in our strategic planning process and working with 8 municipalities, is there's out of our sustainability plan, and I probably didn't mention it in that earlier slide, came a side organization called Sustainable Severn Sound. Very confusing. There's 2 Severn Sound organizations in the same watershed. Our municipalities are confused. We both go to them for the same funding. Why? So we're bringing them back under the fold. One of the things is, and David, you and I talked a bit about this, they have been administering, they're a one-person show. They've been dealing with the Partners in Climate, is it protection? So the PCP program. PCP meant something completely different to me when I was a teenager. So if they're going to be looking at carbon and trying to reduce carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions in municipalities, why would we leave that somewhere separate from us looking at, now how are we going to help municipalities adapt? Why aren't we doing them together? So they're coming back under the fold. That's started this year in our budget system this year. And hopefully that's going to be a better, again, coordinated approach and maybe some better leverage moving forward on that. The low impact development workshop, I'd like to say we borrowed the idea from Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. We didn't, we stole it from them. And they happily just handed it over, including helping us pay for one of the speakers that came up to speak at the workshop, who was absolutely incredible. And again, we offered it free to our municipal staff and elected officials to help staff within those municipalities see that there were different opportunities, things they could be thinking about, and that they didn't need to be doing it all by themselves. That each one of them is probably experiencing the very similar thing, that if they came to us collectively and said, okay, we all want X, we want a low impact development, whatever. We want, for instance, one of them said, I want to know how my engineering policies maybe prevent my municipality from implementing low impact development. Well, you probably all want to know that, so why would we do it for one? We'll help all of them do that together. And again, it's really just about providing support through collaboration, is how I'm seeing it. The other piece we've been able to do, because it's a group of 8, and we are Great Lakes focused municipalities, is I have several of our municipal members are members of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. That's a group of mayors across the Great Lakes on both sides of the border. They will ask us to, again, go with them to those conferences to help support them on a technical side, but also out of that came this Great Lakes Action Plan 2030. And so Gord Miller, who I see some signs up around here, it's the same Gord Miller who used to be the Environment Commissioner, helped lead this project, and out of it came protecting Great Lakes shorelines from making them more climate resilient. So 2 of our municipalities have been included as potential pilot areas to look at. So what does a shoreline municipality need? And shockingly, one of the things that came up was floodplain mapping. If you're not a conservation authority, you probably don't have floodplain mapping. So being able to, again, why would one municipality do that when you could all do that together? So one of the things I find interesting is within the action plan, and so the municipalities that are involved in piloting included Chatham-Kent, and I'm hearing new terminology to me from some of the other partners on this piece, and one of the things that I found really interesting was climate retreat. So talking about municipalities that have infrastructure that don't build like for like if it got washed out 2 years in a row, but actually spending the money to retreat from the shoreline. So whether it's a major road, whether it's other infrastructure, that maybe the time has come that the investment of rebuild isn't worth it anymore in some cases. So Chatham-Kent is they've certainly had a tough year with high water and flooding, and that's a term that we're hearing used more and more. And our municipalities are saying, I don't want to have to start retreating. That's going to cost a lot of money. We better start planning better. And so really how are we doing it together? Again, I think our approach is a different organization in getting ready. I looked around because I knew there was another Joint Municipal Services Board close by in the Holland Marsh. If folks are familiar with the Holland Marsh, it's 2 municipalities and its sole purpose is dealing with the drainage in Holland Marsh. There is not another one that's 8 municipalities solely dedicated to the environmental services, and not environmental, we don't do sewer and water. It's the environmental services, bigger picture, making sure that that community is sustainable over the long term. We do have a little bit of fun. That's my board chair. He's a very welcoming individual, as you can tell, and really forward thinker, so has been really great at getting us more into the how do you help my municipality become more climate ready. So it's really that coordinating the resilience and not doing it alone and not ignoring what your neighbors are doing, and your neighbors are probably willing to just share it, or you can steal it. People apparently stealing nowadays is also sharing in that sense. I don't want to imply to anybody young in this audience stealing is good. Collaborating to pool resources, right? So again, if you're looking at floodplain mapping or hazard land mapping or shoreline mapping, or our municipalities want to run some models to say what would a 1 in 100 year wave uprush look like on a shoreline on the Great Lakes, why would we be doing that one-off? We might as well be working together to try to do that. And the Joint Municipal Services Board piece allows us to do that, to coordinate that for them. Do the same with environmental and weather monitoring, sharing data, coordinating the grant applications, and really the efficiency in sharing resources. I think we've probably all got the same or similar growth and future challenges pieces. But for us, it's become more and more clear. Our municipalities are the key. That's where the rubber hits the road, whether it's in planning or implementation. And they've shown some great leadership, and we wanted to be able to share that model. So I'm really pleased I had the opportunity to come and speak to something a little bit different in the way we've structured an organization moving forward. It's 8 municipalities working together for some shared common goals, and it's a pretty powerful thing when you can get them all together in a room and they're driving forward. So, thank you.